Alright guys, so in this video I'm going to be talking about flow state. I recently wrote something on this, but here we go. So, have you struggled to get things done? And if so, flow is the thing that you need. Many will say that you need to eliminate everything like social media, junk food, etc., which is true to an extent. But what I have found recently in the last day or two is just the idea of perfectionism and how a lot of people, especially me, have been stopped by needing to have everything dialed in. Like you need to have all your food dialed in, you need to have all your schedules dialed in. And I think the main thing that matters when it comes to getting outputs is doing the inputs. So in my mind, sure, having the diets and everything like that are nice, and having all these different tools are nice. They're beautiful, they're great. They make your body healthier, etc., etc. But the thing that people miss out on is the thing that you just need to get it done. So these are helpful, as I said in here, but just think for a second. There are people who are doing what you want to do, and they're scrolling right now. They're eating junk food. They're eating donuts. Obviously, they may not want to look. You may not look how you want to look, but fundamentally, they have what you want, which is either the prestige, the money, the status for the skill set that you're trying to develop. And at the end of the day, most of the things that you want are skills. So, what is flow? Flow is the optimal state of consciousness in which challenges feel effortless and deeply engaging. Athletes call it being in the zone, while creatives experience it as a seamless immersion where time and self-awareness fade. In this state, actions unfold naturally and often more effectively than they would outside of flow. Basically, while writing up the script for this, I was in a flow state. Nothing was seeming to get to me, and it was just seemed like words were just coming out of my head effortlessly. Now, let's get into the model for flow. So, about 3 years ago, I read this book called Flow by Mihai Mihai. I'm gonna mess up his name here. Csikszentmihalyi. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Said it twice. There we go. And basically, this book just talks about the way to live optimally. The two main points I took away from this book was just like you need to have the optimal state of focus to be able to experience life's beautiful things. And it's not necessarily where you're completely bored, you're completely anxious, but it's just when you're extremely, extremely immersed in what you're doing, regardless of the challenge or not. And so, as you can look at this chart, if the challenge is too high, you experience too much anxiety, and if the skills are too high, you experience boredom. So the optimal state is where anxiety meets boredom, and it's just right. Another point that I took away from this book is just to use your leisure time wisely, which is a separate point, which maybe I'll make a separate video on trying to use your leisure time because it's something I need to work on myself. But it was just saying that a lot of people will come home from work and they have, an extra 4 or 5 hours, basically the concept of the 5 to 9. And instead of pushing that towards, maybe making themselves more creative, making themselves bettering themselves, maybe reading a book or something, they kind of just veg out. And, I'm not saying hanging out with your family is bad. In reality, that's good, but I'd say for the vast majority of people, especially in America, I don't even think a lot of people spend time with their families actually that much. But could be playing an instrument, doing art, etc., etc. But that's for another video. So, how do you get into the state of flow? You need to have a clear, specific goal for what to get done. And then you need to make sure you can sit down and focus long enough to do it. So, one of the later points I'm going to make is that in order to get into a state of flow, it doesn't just take 5 minutes. It doesn't just take, 10 minutes. It's one of those things that it's not really timed. It just happens. It's on instinct. It just your brain is just narrowed in on something that you want to get done. And in order for your brain to do this, you need to ensure that you have the right mental resources to do so. So in a later point, again, I'm going to talk about some of the stuff that I've done. So flow happens in the optimal state between anxiety and boredom, as we saw in the previous slide. I'll go back, and as you can see, it's on the chart here. It's just that optimal state between anxiety and boredom. And when one of them is too high or skewed to the right or skewed up, it just creates that state that they're in. So it may seem abstract, but everyone has experienced this sensation before, and now we'll move on to the tips to access it consistently. So, number one, the main one that I find that works regardless of everything that I've done over the years since I was like 16 is to set up a trigger. This simply trains your brain to associate specific action with flow, or rather just simply focus, because while you cannot control flow directly, there are ingredients that you can put in place to where that focus will eventually turn into flow. A few examples is sitting in the same place every day, meditating before the session, making your favorite drink, or lighting a candle or incense. My favorite one is incense. I've used these for probably 2 years every now and again. I know that they're bad. I've heard that, they're very carcinogenic, especially in a closed room, but monks have been using it for thousands of years, and I've seen plenty of YouTubers who have used them in the past. So I've used them and they work to me very effectively because I think in order to focus, that's another point, you want to basically immerse yourself. And the way you immerse yourself in your environment is to use all five senses. You have, I don't even know the five senses anymore: smell, touch. I'm not even going to do that. That's actually embarrassing that I don't know the five senses, but that's besides the point. And so do this consistency and watch the magic happen. I'd say the simplest way to do this, instead of like having triggers and having to set up like 50,000 15-step routines, is really just to have it on your calendar of like, oh, I'm going to block out this focus for 3 hours and then just consistently do the same thing every day without fail. Because as time goes on, your body will just naturally associate that time with, heightened levels of cortisol, and your body's rhythms will match to that specific time. And so that's why it's always easier to keep a consistent schedule, because we are creatures of habit at the end of the day. But I think we adapt to what we are doing at that specific moment, and our brain chemistry and our body can adapt to that. So another tip is to not task switch. No task switching for 20 minutes. I don't know why I wrote it like that, but do one task at a time. So we are meant to monotask. It is not normal for us humans to be switching from task to task. Imagine if I'm sitting here right now and I'm freaking writing at the same time, and I'm, fidgeting with this and not really focused on making this video. It would be very hard for you guys to understand and be able to at least comprehend what I'm talking about. So get really good at monotasking, and I'm talking about get so monastic at it. You focus on one task at a time. If you're recording the video, you're recording the video. Even try to do this. I know some people are really a little bit more like dogmatic about it, where they're like, oh, I need to eat without watching shows and walk without doing this. Try to do that as much as possible. I think one easy thing you could do, which is not on the slide, is just go for like a 30-minute walk without your phone. Is let your brain just rest, puts on that default switch mode, and you'll know what I'm talking about, what real monotasking is. And then moving on to the next task makes it way, way easier if you're just focusing on that one thing that you're getting done. So the more that you switch from tab to task to another, the longer it will take for you to maintain focus. And it takes about 15 to 20 minutes to actually get into a focused state. Do your own research. I'm not going to cite anything. There you go. So use music. Experiment with different types of music. I cannot stress enough how music has single-handedly given me and pushed me into a state of focus where originally it wasn't there, especially when you're in loud settings. Having headphones like I have on now can help as well, but combining that with music, it helps. So some tasks are better suited for music than others. I find that music while studying a subject like math sucks, but writing is good. And this mainly has to do with being able to pull resources. And that's why I find it harder to, do things like math and get into a really deep flow state with it. It's because you're pulling a lot of things when you're studying knowledge. You're pulling upon resources. You might have a paper here, another thing there, another thing there. You might need to watch a YouTube video because you don't understand something. But I think when you do understand, you have the requisite skills, as we talked about above in the chart, the anxiety and boredom. When skill is too high, there is boredom, and so you get bored. So I think the thing is it's really just to get into a state of focus and being able to monotask at all times. So try this: 20 minutes of music at the beginning of the session and no more after that, and I promise you, you will notice a big difference. One tool that you can use is Brain FM. This is not a sponsorship or anything like that, but Brain FM, I've been using this for about 3 years, and I can say noticeably, since I started using that over, YouTube Music or Spotify, having those focus playlists, it's so different. Just try it. It's about $50 a month. They do promotion all the time. You can find affiliate links all over the internet. Go for it. Overall, just experiment with what works best for you. So supplements. So before I go on to, these supplements and, just essentially, I already listed here, but essentially tell you what each of them do, I want to say you need to do your own research, number one. And number two, do not rely on these entirely. Do not combine them. Like you can combine them all at one time, but do not get hooked on them because they all have basically diminishing returns after a long enough period of time. Use these when you really, really need to. And so I recommend you go watch a few videos on Huberman about focus. Just go watch people like Rian Doris. Just learn how to focus. And one simple way that's behavioral tool that you can use is just meditation. 10, 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes a day really, really helps your brain just get centered in on a specific task or topic, or just in general, just make you more. It really helps you to be able to sit down and you become more aware of like what's distracting you at all times. And I think that keeps the horse blinders on, if that makes any sense there. So number one is caffeine. Caffeine is probably the most used nootropic on this planet. It's probably one of the two most researched drugs, or supplements or whatever you want to call them, outside of creatine. And so caffeine's really good. I use it. I find that, I didn't really use caffeine up until I think the end of 2023. And for the time I really started getting into trying to be into flow state for since about 2021, really understanding it, I didn't use caffeine at all. Dark chocolate helps because it boosts BDNF, technically the same thing, has a whole bunch of other compounds in it, but that's like theobromine and everything like that. But that's do your own research with that. Tyrosine really just boosts the catecholamines in your brain, I'm pretty sure. I think that's like norepinephrine, noradrenaline. Basically, it's just a precursor to dopamine, and dopamine feel good. Theanine, it gets you closer to the alpha brain waves, if I'm not mistaken, that are closely related to sleep, in which if you look into this a little bit more, sleep is basically the closest state you can get to I think it's the alpha state, which is basically the state that people's brains are in when they're in flow state. Same thing with meditation. Meditation can get you to do this. So please do your own research, watch Huberman, or simply YouTube. Another few small things like cold showers really help to boost dopamine. That really, really helps. Getting some sunlight. Sunlight really does help. But I'd say just research like neurochemistry, and you'll find your own things. You can lace your own kind of cocktails and put your own stacks together. But I would say, as always, I'm not a doctor. Please do your own research, and I say this emphatically. Please do your own research, but also just be willing to experiment with these things because some things just don't work for others. Some things do. So there we go. So this is everything I have used to focus over the years. There may be some things I left out, like diet, sleep, and exercise. These are very low hanging fruits. Everyone knows them. And honestly, before you go do any of the other tools, please focus on these things. I always have to remind myself to make sure I'm eating clean, make sure my diet's good, make sure my sleep is good, and make sure you do consistently exercise because that alone will improve your mood so much more, which mood has a very big factor in your ability to focus. But like most things, it's a muscle that can be trained with enough attention and effort. So do what you want with this information and take care.